the way that we view ourselves is changing. In terms of conservation now, I mentioned my work in China. Much of the conservation work being done in China is emphasizing ecotourism as a good, sustainable way to protect these habitats, the remaining good wildlife habitat over there. And you've got busloads of people driving out to these places, taking pictures, driving back out of there, and going home and looking at their photographs. That's good. They're going out, they're appreciating the beauty of the natural world that they've got, but they're taking themselves out of nature and viewing nature from the outside looking in, rather than being immersed in nature. If you think about the timeline of our species, you know, all the way back with Australopithecus, we've got this tiny little sliver in modern day where we're suddenly starting to take ourselves out of the ecosystem and look at it from the outside looking in, like staring at an aquarium. We should be swimming around in that aquarium, you know? That's the way we've evolved. That is the animal that is man. We're part of this ecosystem, you know? And in my opinion, we're not different from the wolf. We are a predator, and we belong in the ecosystem. And we have the knowledge to be in that ecosystem without doing damage. We can be there sustainably, at least in this country. But many of us are seeking satisfaction in the urban jungle. And as an animal, that's not really where we belong, again, in my opinion. Living in an urban setting, I think, causes a lot of problems for us as animals, you know? We are forced to eat in ways that are not natural or healthy. We have a lot of problems with depression. And I think a lot of these, you know, issues like childhood obesity, issues like depression, probably have a pretty strong link to people not spending enough time out where it's green, you know? If I start getting stressed out about something, put me out in the woods for 45 minutes and let me stroll around, it does a world of good. I would probably be in a rubber room if I didn't have a chance to go out there and, you know, get stung by bees and get poison ivy. So these are some happy guys. We're not in the urban jungle at this point. My brother-in-law on the left, my brother on the right, and a successful deer hunt in northern Michigan. I'll point out, size does not matter, although this is a really big doe. She doesn't have big antlers or anything like that. But we are happy guys. And we're also guys who appreciate the fact that this animal died so that we could eat the meat that she's providing for our households. And, you know, the three of us this morning, after the snow had stopped, we dragged this deer out. We spent the morning skinning the deer out, cutting the steaks and grinding the burger and packaging everything up. And, you know, when we walked up to the deer that my brother had taken, we had a moment of respect and very somber feelings about the fact that he had killed this animal. We were very happy because we had all been trying for several days to get a deer in northern Michigan where the deer density is nothing like it is here. And my brother was finally successful. But the fact of the matter is those grins have nothing to do with an unsatiable bloodlust. They have everything to do with human beings being in the environment where they belong, doing what we've done for countless generations with respect for the animal that we're hunting. But hunters haven't always been positive the way I'm trying to preach that they are now. And the fact of the matter is, in our country, even in recent history, we have some pretty embarrassing points on our track record. Hunters here in quotation marks, because this is not hunting the way we hunt now under the North American model of wildlife conservation. This is market hunting, and those two are very different. Hopefully people in this room have a basic understanding for why what we do now is different from market hunting. But there were dark days of overexploitation. You know, we had bison tongues and furs being shipped out east, passenger pigeons certainly. And speaking of the passenger pigeon, who can tell me the answer to this question?
Well, regulated hunting? I'd say none, but.
Exactly. Regulated hunting has not led to the extinction of any species. But if you poll American people, today 25% of adult Americans think that the type of hunting that's done today in the North American wildlife conservation model causes some species to become endangered, puts them at risk of potentially being extinct. And this is simply not true. But that's where the public education is right now. So during the days of overexploitation, people using punt guns, shooting into flocks of migratory birds, piling them up, selling feathers, selling meat out east, and basically doing everything they can for a buck. Even the species that we take sort of for granted now as being ubiquitous in our part of the country were pushed to the brink. Wild turkeys and white-tailed deer were no exception. They were hunted, to the point of regional extirpation in a lot of places. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Ding Darling drew this, just sort of the gradual observations and predictions that Ding Darling had for our migratory birds. You can't see this. 1920, you've got the single hunter down there in the marsh grass and a flock of ducks. 10 years later, 1930, a single duck with a flock of hunters blasting away at it. And then in 1940, the wild duck in the museum. So Ding Darling was a hunter who really had an appreciation for the fact that what we were doing as a hunting community was not sustainable and something needed to change. And he was a great leader in making sure that that did happen. So as hunters, what did we change? Well, we actually asked to be policed as a resource user, as a group of resource users. We asked that rules be put into place to make sure that our resources were not overexploited. So what rules do we want? You guys probably know some of these. Bag limits. How many individuals can be taken per person per day? Possession limits. You can't just go out and shoot your limit of animals every day and keep stockpiling them. You have to use them. And the possession limit refers to the number of individuals that you can have in your possession at a given time. The timing and length of hunting seasons. As biologists, this all should make great sense to us. White-tailed deer, for example, hunting them in the spring would be a bad idea because if you were to shoot the mother deer, the fawn would not survive, whereas by the fall, that individual, that youngster, would be able to make it on its own. Equipment restrictions, punt guns, net cannons, all the equipment that was used to just mow down as many individuals as possible went where it belonged, in the museums. Get it out of here. We also want to be involved, so how do hunters get involved now? Well, many of us belong to various hunting conservation organizations. In the United States, there's more than 500 of these conservation organizations. And what's funny about them, the Chinese, when I talk about this stuff in China, they think it's really interesting that all these groups kind of focus on one species or one group. But the fact of the matter is, take Ducks Unlimited as a perfect example. Basically, the mission statement of Ducks Unlimited is to protect as much wetland habitat as possible. And there's a heck of a lot of creatures other than ducks that use those wetland habitats. The same is true for most of these organizations in terms of benefiting species other than that for which the organization is named. Like I said before, we spend a lot of money, not just on license fees, but on excise taxes. Anybody who buys a firearm or ammunition, there's a chunk of that goes into the Pittman Robertson dollars that funds lots of research, lots of habitat preservation, lots of programs geared towards teaching new people how to hunt, all those sorts of things.